Hello, I'm Steph and I'm going to be teaching you today how to make this lovely passing arrows bracelet using the lovely new Khéops Par Puca beads. It's quite a simple design that requires only stringing. It looks a lot more complicated than it actually is, which is always wonderful. So I'm going to get started. I'm using 7 Strand Beadalon to thread all the beads onto. I'm going to start by adding a very useful bead stopper to the end of my wire just to stop my beads from escaping. And then it's a simple pattern to create this bracelet. I'm using the lovely red coral coloured beads in the Par Pucas and the size 15 check glass seed beads in opaque black and also size 11. So I'm going to pour a few of these out. Ready? So I'm going to be threading through the back of the Khéops beads. So these are really clever. They're one of the additions to the 2-hole bead collection. So you can see there that there's 2 holes on one side of the triangle and the holes come out parallel to each other, one side of the opposite point. So they're really versatile and allow you to do lots of intricate designs. So I'm going to thread through the back of a Khéops bead. So through the side where there's 2 holes, and then I'm going to add 2 tiny little size 11s, sorry, the size 15s to begin with. So 2 size 15s, they're the smaller of the 2 beads, and yes, they are tiny, followed by 1 single size 11. So what happens when you thread those down and they sit next to the Khéops bead is that the 2 tiny beads sit down the side, and that size 11 sits almost level with the point of the Khéops bead. And then we repeat this, so we're going to add another Khéops bead going through the back again. Followed by 2 tiny size 15s. And the size 11. So again, when these sit down next to the beads, you will see that the 2 Khéops almost touch and we're building up a nice little pattern of beads in between them. Okay, so now I'm going to continue adding beads in exactly the same pattern until I've got enough Khéops beads around on the wire to fit around my wrist. I've needed 19 Khéops Par Puca beads to make it wrap around my wrist. So once you've completed a whole row, you need to create a second one with exactly the same number of beads in. So once we have 2 full strings of Khéops beads with the seed beads in between, these are currently identical, and basically to create the bracelet we're going to zip these 2 rows together. But first we need to turn the direction of the Khéops round on 1 string. And then the way that these fit together is that the arrows on one point one way and the arrows on the other point the other way, so that they then slot together, you can see here in the middle. And then we use a 3rd piece of beadalon and zip from one side all the way along, pulling all the triangles close together. I'm going to start from one end, but first of all, to make sure I don't lose all my beads while I'm doing it, I'm going to secure both these ends together using a bead stopper. So now I can't, as I'm threading, I'm not going to lose all my beads from this end. And I'm even going to secure this end together, but leaving a bit of a gap so I've got room for the beads to move around a little bit. And now I can start zipping my beads together. Basically, you're going to go through the back in the 2nd hole of this first Khéops bead. You're going to come out of that hole and then go through the hole of the Khéops on the other strand. So they'll start to fit together like this. And then we'll move to the next one. Make sure that you alternate which side you're threading through. The pattern won't really line up if you do miss a bead, so it'll be obvious straight away if you've made a mistake. So now the pattern's starting to come together, and you keep going along both strands, going through the top bead, followed by the bottom bead, until you reach the other side. You can now see each side is now zipped together, so creating my lovely little passing triangles, passing arrows even. Right, so now the passing arrows are all connected, we need to finish off the ends and attach a clasp. So what I did to finish off this bracelet is just add a few beads onto the end just to bring all the threads together and then put them into a necklace end. So I'm going to use the size 15s on the very end to add the beads on. This end here where it's furthest away from the end, we need a few more beads on there and just a few on these two. So I'm just going to thread those on. If you try and fit too many beads on right to the very end where they all come together, you just end up with a really bulky bit. So I tend to put a few less on the middle strand and then more on the outer strand, so it still disguises the wire, but you don't end up with a big bulky bit at the end. I always do this little bit by eye because depending on the size of the seed beads, if you end up with a couple of slightly odd shaped seed beads, it could change the length anyway. So once they start to look okay grouped together, you can thread your ends through a necklace end. I'm putting all of those through the back here, followed by a crimp tube. I've got my necklace end on here now, so I find it's easy, rather than trying to fiddle and get your pliers inside the necklace end, is if you grip hold of your crimp bead with your pliers so you can still move it around, and then slide it down inside the necklace end, then crimp it. That tends to be a lot easier to do than trying to get your pliers inside beforehand. It's always worth just giving it an extra squeeze from the other side, and also test that it's not going to come off before you trim off the excess and close the necklace end. I'm just going to use flush cutters here to trim off the wire, and then use the chain nose pliers, I'll zoom in for you, to close the necklace end. So I grip with the chain nose pliers on one side of the necklace end and start the folding process with my thumb just to get it going, and then gently squeeze the two halves together. And there we go. Okay, now we're going to do the same to the other end as well. So we need to add the few beads on and then get the necklace end on. So once you've got the beads on for the other side of the bracelet, you want to check that there's no gaps in the wire, so you don't have any gaps or any buckling. You can always push all the beads down to the end that's already finished to make sure that everything's lying nice and flat. And now you can add the necklace end and the crimp to this side as well. Now for this I'm going to use a toggle clasp. So you can actually attach the loop side of the toggle clasp directly to the necklace end on this side and just make that into a loop. I tend to find that works nicely on a bracelet because it keeps it nice and flat. If you have lots of jump rings on the end attached to this side, it has a tendency to move all over the place when you're trying to actually put your bracelet on. On this side, because you need a little bit of space to pull your bar through your toggle, it's worth actually putting at least 2 small jump rings on this side. So I'm just going to finish this end, so fold that over. I'm going to open up 2 4mm jump rings to connect my bar on this side, and I always twist open jump rings so you don't lose the shape. So I'm going to hold on to one side in my pliers, use a second pair of chain nose pliers just to twist them open. Doesn't have to be very much, just enough to connect the items together. So that one's going to go into there. twist that one closed, open up a second one, and that's going to connect that first jump ring to the bar of the toggle clasp. Twist that closed, and voila, your bracelet is complete. A really nice simple pattern using the new Khéops, and it's strung rather than bead woven, so it's a great pattern for anyone really. Very achievable.